Picture this. It's a Friday night in 1982 at a dusty drag strip outside Houston, Texas. A 17-year-old kid in a rusted-out Datsun just ran a 13.2, beating a 468 cubic inch Chevy big block that cost more than his dad's house. When they pop the hood, the owner sees 4 cylinders, 97 cubic inches, and what looks like a soup can welded to the exhaust. A $60 junkyard turbo that shouldn't exist. This is how one broke high school kid with a welder outsmarted Detroit. The setup: Texas drag racing in 1982. To understand why this matters, you need to understand Texas drag racing in the early 1980s. The economy was in the toilet. Inflation was running wild. Gas had gone from 30 cents a gallon to over $1. President Reagan was in office, promising it would get better. But for working-class kids in Texas, it had not gotten better yet. Drag racing was king. Every town with a straight piece of road had a scene. Friday and Saturday nights, you would find 20, 30, sometimes 50 cars lined up, putting money where their mouths were. But here is the thing about drag racing in 1982. It was expensive, stupid expensive. The formula was simple. Cubic inches equals horsepower equals winning. A competitive small block Chevy, we are talking 357 cubic inches, needed at least $3,000 in machine work just to keep up. A big block, 427 or 454 cubic inches, meant you were looking at $5,000 to $7,000. And that is assuming you did not blow it up, which you probably would. The teenagers who wanted to race had basically 3 options. 1. Have rich parents. 2. Work 2 jobs and save for years. 3. Do not race. Most chose option 3. The drag strips were dominated by guys in their 30s and 40s who had been building these engines for decades, who had the money, the knowledge, the connections. The kids were priced out. Completely. A high school kid working at Dairy Queen making $3.35 an hour could not compete. The math did not work. Even if you saved every penny, you could not afford a competitive engine before you graduated and had to get a real job. This created a weird dynamic. Drag racing was a young man's sport being dominated by middle-aged men because only they could afford it. The old-timers would talk about the good old days when any kid with a wrench could build a hot rod. Meanwhile, they were running $12,000 engines against each other while teenagers watched from the fence. Into this world came Danny Martinez. Enter Danny Martinez. Danny was 17 in 1982. He was a junior at Sam Houston High School. He worked at his uncle's transmission shop after school and on weekends. Smart kid, good with his hands, and terrible at sitting still in class. His teachers said he had potential but lacked focus. What they meant was, he spent every history class drawing intake manifold designs in his notebook. He'd grown up around cars. His uncle Roberto ran a small shop that specialized in rebuilding transmissions for work trucks. Nothing fancy, nothing fast, just honest work keeping old Fords and Chevys running. Danny had been sweeping floors there since he was 12. By 15, he was rebuilding TH350s by himself. By 17, Roberto trusted him with customer cars. The car was a 1974 Datsun 510. Danny's mom had bought it new, drove it for 8 years. Then it sat in the backyard when the transmission died. Danny rebuilt the transmission as a learning project. Then he started driving it. Then he started wondering if he could make it fast. Everyone laughed. I mean, everyone. The Datsun 510 was a joke in Texas racing circles. It was a tiny Japanese Econobox with an L-Series 4-cylinder that made maybe 96 horsepower when it was new. By 1982, with 120,000 miles, it probably made 70 maybe. The drag racers called it a sewing machine. They said you could put a parachute on it and it still would not slow down because it could not get fast enough in the first place. One guy told Danny he should put a lawnmower deck under it and at least get some use out of it, but Danny had a problem. He wanted to race. He had the car. He had the skills. What he did not have was money. A competitive small block Chevy engine swap would cost $4,000 minimum. He made $425 a week at the shop. Do the math. Even if he ate nothing but ramen and never went out, he would be 25 years old before he could afford it. There had to be another way. Danny spent his lunch breaks at Pick and Pull, the local junkyard, not looking for anything specific, just seeing what was there, learning, thinking. He would walk through acres of dead cars, seeing patterns, understanding what failed and why. One day in June of 1982, he was walking through the industrial section. Not cars, but trucks, generators, equipment. And he saw it. A diesel generator from a construction site, maybe 10 years old, completely seized up. But bolted to it was this turbocharger. Not a car turbo, an industrial unit meant to force air into a diesel engine for high-altitude operation. The thing was massive. The compressor housing was probably 6 inches across. It was designed to make boost at low RPM, to run forever under constant load, to survive being covered in dirt and diesel soot. It was built like farm equipment, which is to say it was built to be indestructible. Danny asked the yard guy how much. The guy looked at this seized-up generator, figured nobody wanted a turbo from an industrial diesel, and said $60 for the whole thing. Danny negotiated him down to $50 for just the turbo. The guy was happy to cut it off with a torch. Danny dragged this thing home, probably 25 pounds of cast iron and steel, and started thinking. He had read about turbochargers. Hot Rod magazine ran articles about the Buick Grand National. He knew Porsche turbos existed. He understood the theory. Compress air, cram more air into the engine, add more fuel, make more power. But every article said the same thing. Turbos were complicated. They needed sophisticated fuel injection. They needed boost controllers. They needed special pistons to handle the compression. They needed premium fuel. They needed expert tuning. They were expensive. The cheapest turbo kit available in 1982 for any 4-cylinder car was about $1,200, and that was for a Mustang 2.3. For a Datsun, nothing existed. You would have to custom fabricate everything, which meant machine shop time, which meant money Danny did not have. Everyone he showed the turbo to said the same thing. Won't work. Too big for that little engine. No way to control boost. You will melt the pistons. You will blow the head gasket. You will destroy the engine in 30 seconds. Roberto, his uncle, was more diplomatic. He told Danny that the turbo was meant for a diesel. Diesels run at much lower RPM. That turbo would never spool up on a gasoline engine. And even if it did, Danny had no way to tune for it. He would lean it out and burn a hole right through the piston. But here is what Danny figured. He had nothing to lose. The engine was free. It came with the car. If he blew it up, he would rebuild it and try again. And maybe, just maybe, everyone was wrong. Let's talk about why turbos were impossible in 1982. Actually, they weren't impossible. Porsche had been turbocharging the 911 since 1975. Saab had turbos. BMW was experimenting. But these were all sophisticated, expensive systems with fuel injection and electronic boost control. For a carburetor engine, the problems were massive. First, boost control. A turbo with no wastegate will just keep building boost until something explodes. You need a wastegate, a valve that opens to dump excess exhaust pressure, limiting boost to a safe level. In 1982, factory turbo cars had precision wastegates that cost $300 for the part. Second, fuel delivery. When you pressurize the intake, you are cramming more air into the cylinders. More air needs more fuel, or you get detonation, which is a polite way of saying your pistons turn into modern art. Fuel injection can adjust automatically. A carburetor has no idea the air is pressurized. It will just lean out and self-destruct. Third, timing. More boost means more cylinder pressure, which means you need to retard timing or the engine will knock itself to death. Factory turbo cars had sophisticated knock sensors and computer-controlled timing. A Datsun 510 from 1974 had a distributor with points, literally 19th century technology. Fourth, durability. Higher cylinder pressures mean more stress on everything: pistons, rods, crank, head gasket, block. Factory turbo engines had forged internals and stronger head gaskets. The L-Series 4-cylinder in Danny's Datsun had cast pistons and a head gasket designed for 96 horsepower. In 1982, a factory turbo car like the Buick Grand National cost $18,000. That was 3 times the price of a regular car. All that extra cost was engineering, development, and special parts. Danny had $60 and a welder. But here is his advantage. He did not know it was impossible. He did not know all the reasons it would not work. He just knew the theory: compress air, add fuel, make power, and he had this turbo that probably worked. Sometimes ignorance is an asset. The $60 solution. Danny's fabrication happened in his uncle's shop at night, after work, using scrap metal from the dumpster. The manifold was made from exhaust tubing salvaged from a Chevy van. The downpipe was from a Ford truck. The intake piping was aluminum irrigation pipe from a farm supply store, $2 for 8 feet. He welded everything with a garbage harbor freight stick welder. The welds looked like a blind person had done them during an earthquake, but they held pressure. That's all that mattered. The carburetor situation was genius in its stupidity. Everyone said you could not run a carburetor with boost. Danny's solution was simple. Put the carburetor before the turbo in the low pressure area and let the turbo compress the air-fuel mixture. This is called draw-through turbo configuration, and it actually works. Older Corvair turbos did this. Some industrial engines did this. But nobody was doing it in 1982 because everyone had moved to fuel injection. Danny did not know this was an obsolete idea. He just knew it solved his fuel delivery problem. The wastegate was a work of art. He took a spring from a screen door, probably cost 50 cents at the hardware store, and rigged it to a valve made from a gate valve from the plumbing aisle. When exhaust pressure exceeded the spring tension, the valve would crack open and dump pressure. Adjusting boost meant stretching or compressing the spring. High tech, right? For the oil feed, he tapped into the block where the mechanical fuel pump used to be, ran a braided brake line to the turbo center section, and drained back into the oil pan with a fitting from a lawnmower. Total cost, maybe $8. Ignition timing was handled by a recurve kit for the distributor. Danny lightened the weights and weakened the springs so the mechanical advance would come in slower, effectively retarding timing under boost. This kit, designed for towing applications, cost $12. From J.C. Whitney. Let's add it up. Turbo, $50. Piping, $4. Carb spacer, welded from scrap. Wastegate spring, 50 cents. Oil lines, $8. Distributor kit, $12. Gaskets and hardware, maybe $6. Total, $80.50. Let's call it $60 for the story, because that was what the turbo cost, and everything else was basically free. This should not have worked. Every engineer would tell you it was wrong. The welds were terrible. The wastegate was comical. The carb placement violated every modern turbo principle. The whole thing looked like a tetanus infection waiting to happen. But Danny did not build it to be right. He built it to work. First test and disaster. The first startup was on a Saturday morning in August. Danny had spent 6 weeks building this thing, working every night, missing parties, skipping dates. Roberto let him use the shop but made him sign a waiver, saying it was not the shop's fault when Danny killed himself. The engine fired right up. The turbo made a whistling sound like a sad vacuum cleaner. Danny let it idle for 10 minutes, checking for leaks, watching oil pressure, listening for death rattles. Everything seemed okay. He took it for a test drive around the block. Light throttle. Easy does it. The turbo would spool up around 3,000 revolutions per minute, and you could feel a slight push. Nothing dramatic, but it was working. Holy hell, it was actually working. He came back to the shop, checked everything again, and decided to make a pull. Second gear, from 2,000 to 6,000 full throttle. He nailed it. The Datsun absolutely exploded forward, not like a fast car, like a physics experiment. The boost gauge, a mechanical unit from a truck, swung past 20 pounds per square inch. The engine screamed. Danny's adrenaline screamed louder. He hit 50 miles per hour in second gear, something that normally took most of the block. Then, it made a sound. Not a good sound. A sound like someone dropping a toolbox down a flight of stairs. Then smoke. Then silence. Danny coasted back to the shop with his heart in his throat. They pulled the head. Cylinder 3 looked like the surface of the moon. The piston had melted a hole clean through the crown. The cylinder wall was scored. The head gasket was blown. Roberto just shook his head and said, "Told you, mijo. Too much boost, not enough fuel. Too much heat. Physics do not care about your dream." Danny had just destroyed his engine, proving everyone right. He had no money for parts. School started in 3 weeks. The dream was dead. Except it was not. Because Danny had learned something. In that one pull, that one glorious moment before the engine died, he'd felt what was possible. The turbo worked. The power was real. He just needed to not melt the pistons. The fix came from an unexpected place. One of Roberto's customers, an old farmer named Earl, heard about the project. Earl said he had used propane injection on his tractor to prevent detonation when running low-quality fuel. It was dirt simple. A propane bottle, a regulator, a nozzle, spray propane into the intake under boost. Propane has a higher octane rating than gasoline. It would cool the intake charge, and it would lean out the mixture just enough to prevent meltdown. A used propane bottle cost $12 at a garage sale. The regulator and fittings, maybe 15 more. Earl helped Danny set it up, rigged to open only under boost. They rebuilt the engine with used pistons from pick and pull. $25. New head gasket, $30. Danny was now all in for about $130. Second test run, same second gear pull. The boost hit 15 pounds per square inch this time. Danny had adjusted the wastegate spring. The propane system kicked in. The engine pulled like a freight train and did not explode. They checked the plugs, perfect color, checked compression, all good. The thing actually worked. Danny had built a functional turbo system for the cost of 2 tanks of gas. The street races begin. Word got around fast in the Texas street racing scene. Some kid had a turbo Datsun. People came to see it like it was a circus attraction. They would look under the hood, see this Frankenstein contraption of junkyard parts and plumbing supplies, and laugh. Then Danny would offer to race for $20. Nobody took him seriously. $20 to beat up on a kid in a Datsun? Sure, easy money. The first victim was a guy named Craig with a 357 small block Nova. Nice car, probably 250 horsepower, a consistent 15-second car. Craig put his $20 on the hood. They lined up on Farm Road 1092, ran from one stop sign to another, about a quarter mile. Danny launched at 4,000 RPM, the Datsun spinning tires like crazy because it weighed nothing. The boost hit. The propane kicked in, and the little 4-cylinder screamed to 7,000 RPM. He shifted to second gear, the boost building instantly because the turbo was already spooled. The Datsun pulled ahead. By third gear, he had gapped Craig by 3 car lengths. Craig could not believe it. He demanded to check for nitrous. There was no nitrous. He demanded to check displacement, 97 cubic inches. He asked how much boost. Danny, not wanting to sound insane, said about 10. It was actually running 15. Craig paid up and left, probably questioning his entire understanding of physics. Next was a 427 big block Chevelle, a guy named Rick, a local hero, in a consistent 13-second car. Rick heard about the Nova getting beaten and wanted to defend big block honor. He put up $50. Same road, same result. The Datsun launched hard. The turbo spooled instantly. and despite having 1/4 the displacement, it hung with the Chevelle through first gear, pulled even in second, and walked away in third. 13.4 seconds versus 13.8 seconds. Rick was less gracious than Craig. He accused Danny of lying about the engine. Danny popped the hood. Yep, 4 cylinders. Rick could not process it. He had spent $6,000 on that big block. Danny had $60 in the turbo and scrap metal everywhere else. It did not compute. The wins kept stacking. Every weekend, new challengers. Some came from other towns hearing stories about the turbo Datsun that could not possibly be real. They would show up with their big blocks, their tunnel ram intakes, their 4-barrel carbs, their chrome valve covers. Danny would show up in a rusted-out sedan with mismatched wheels and soup cans welded to the engine. And he would win. Not every time, mind you. Sometimes the Datsun would break. Sometimes Danny would miss a shift. But he won enough to build a reputation. The racers started demanding inspections. They would bring their buddies who knew engines to verify Danny was not cheating. These guys would stare at the turbo setup like archaeologists examining an alien spacecraft. They would see the screen door spring wastegate and the propane bottle and the irrigation pipe intake and just shake their heads. One guy, a mechanic at a Chevy dealership, said it was the stupidest thing he had ever seen and it absolutely should not work. Then, he watched Danny run a 13 flat and said, maybe he did not understand turbochargers as well as he thought. Nobody could prove Danny was cheating because he was not. Everything was legal. Primitive, yes. Ugly, absolutely. But legal. The drag strip showdown. By November of 1982, Danny had won enough street races that the drag strip regulars heard about him. Royal Purple Raceway, the local track, had a street night every Friday. Run what you brung, $10 entry, winner take all purse. The big dog at Royal Purple was a guy named Tommy Wilkes. Tommy was 38, owned a successful construction company, and had been drag racing since the 60s. His car was a 1968 Camaro with a 454 cubic inch big block making somewhere north of 500 horsepower. It ran consistent 12.3 seconds. Tommy heard about the Datsun and thought it was funny. He offered Danny a deal. Race heads up, no index, no handicap. If Danny won, Tommy would pay him $500. If Tommy won, Danny would pay nothing. It was essentially a free shot at humiliating the upstart. Danny, being 17 and possessing more confidence than sense, agreed. Friday night, the place was packed. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to see the turbo Datsun get destroyed by a real race car. The betting was heavily in Tommy's favor. Nobody gave Danny a chance. They staged. Tommy's Camaro sat there rumbling, shaking, sounding like controlled violence. The big block idle was so lumpy you could count the cylinder firings. It sounded like what God would drive. Danny's Datsun sounded like a sewing machine with asthma. The 4-cylinder ticked along at idle, the turbo whistling slightly, the whole car looking like it was embarrassed to be there. The lights came down. Both cars launched. Tommy's Camaro hooked hard, all that torque valve and traction working perfectly. Danny's Datsun spun tires for the first 50 feet, despite weighing barely 2,000 pounds. But here, physics got interesting. The Camaro made peak power around 5,500 RPM and had to shift at 6,000. The turbo Datsun made peak power everywhere. There was boost and could rev to 7,000. By the 60-foot mark, the Camaro was ahead by half a car. By the 8th mile, they were dead even. Danny shifted into third, the turbo staying spooled, the boost jumping back to 15 pounds per square inch instantly. The Datsun pulled ahead. At the finish line, Danny clicked off at 13.18 seconds at 104 miles per hour. Tommy ran 12.97 seconds at 114 miles per hour. Wait, what? Tommy won? Except Danny had a 25-pound kid driving and Tommy's Camaro weighed 4,000 pounds. Except the Datsun cost $60 and the Camaro cost $20,000. Except Danny had proven that a turbo 4-cylinder could run within 0.2 of a second of a purpose-built big block race car. The crowd lost their minds. Half were celebrating the fact that the natural order held and the big block won. The other half were celebrating that a kid with junkyard parts had come within inches of beating it. Tommy was gracious. He didn't pay the $500 because Danny didn't technically win, but he bought Danny dinner and spent 2 hours asking about the turbo setup. Tommy, like the street racers, was a real engineer. He understood what Danny had accomplished. The tech inspectors at the track were baffled. They made Danny pop the hood, checked for illegal nitrous, illegal fuel, illegal anything. They found a propane bottle, which was technically fuel, but it wasn't banned. They found a turbo held together with hardware store parts, which wasn't illegal, just stupid. They found an engine that probably made 250 horsepower from 97 cubic inches, which in 1982 was basically witchcraft. They couldn't disqualify him because he hadn't broken any rules. The rules didn't account for someone crazy enough to build a turbo system from scrap metal and determination. How it actually worked. Let's talk about why Danny's contraption actually worked when it should not have. The industrial turbo, while completely wrong for the application on paper, was accidentally perfect. It was designed to make boost at low speed for a diesel engine. Diesel engines rev low, about 3,000 revolutions per minute at most. The turbo was sized to spool quickly and efficiently at those speeds. Danny's Datsun engine could rev to 7,000 revolutions per minute, but he was running boost from 2,000 to 6,000 revolutions per minute. That put the engine right in the turbo's efficiency range. By complete accident, he had matched the turbo to the engine perfectly. The boost pressure was limited by that screen door spring wastegate to about 15 pounds per square inch. That was actually conservative by turbo standards. Factory turbo cars were running 6 to 8 pounds per square inch. Race cars were running 25 or more pounds per square inch. 15 was aggressive, but not suicidal. The draw-through carburetor setup, while obsolete, solved the fuel enrichment problem perfectly. If you pressurize the intake after the carburetor, the air gets compressed but the fuel stays the same, which leads to lean conditions. If instead you draw air and fuel through the carburetor and then compress everything together, the air-fuel ratio stays roughly the same. The propane injection added just enough extra fuel and octane to prevent detonation. The timing retard from the recurve kit for the distributor probably pulled out 5 degrees of advance under boost. Combined with propane's higher octane, this kept cylinder pressures just below the catastrophic level. The whole system was making approximately 240 horsepower at 15 pounds per square inch of boost. For comparison, a stock Datsun L series made 96 horsepower. Danny had increased power by 150% for the cost of a nice dinner. Compare this to a modern turbo setup. Today you can buy a bolt-on turbo kit for a 4-cylinder car for $3,000 to $5,000. It will be beautiful, reliable, engineered to perfection. It will make the same power Danny was making in 1982. The difference? Danny did it for $60 and plumbing supplies. Detroit's response and legacy. The automotive industry in the early 80s was in turmoil. Gas prices, emissions regulations, and foreign competition were killing the old business model. Detroit knew turbos were the future, but did not know how to make them reliable and affordable. Kids like Danny were figuring it out in their garages faster than engineers in billion-dollar R&D departments. The aftermarket turbo industry basically started with people like Danny, lunatics willing to weld junk together and see what happened. By the mid-80s, companies like Gale Banks Engineering and SPA Turbo were selling turbo kits for everything. The technology Danny stumbled into, draw-through carburetor setups, propane injection, mechanical boost control, became standard in the early aftermarket. This was practical, low-cost, and surprisingly effective. Ford introduced the Thunderbird Turbo Coupe in 1983. Dodge brought out the Shelby Charger Turbo. Even Chevrolet eventually turbocharged the Cavalier. All of these use sophisticated electronic controls and fuel injection that cost thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, kids across America were turbocharging Vegas and Pintos and Datsuns using Danny's junkyard methodology. Most blew up their engines. Some, like Danny, figured it out. The ones who figured it out started businesses. Those businesses became the aftermarket performance industry we know today. Danny himself graduated high school, got a job at a machine shop, and eventually opened his own speed shop in the early 90s. The shop specialized in turbo conversions for street cars. He is still there today, still building turbo setups, though now with CNC machined manifolds and electronic boost controllers instead of screen door springs. He keeps that original turbo from 1982 on a shelf in his office. It is rusty, crusty, and looks like tetanus waiting to happen. Customers ask about it. He tells them it is the turbo that beat big block engines with $60 and stupidity. Some do not believe him. Those are the customers who do not understand that innovation does not come from money or degrees. It comes from necessity, creativity, and being too ignorant to know something is impossible. The story of Danny Martinez and his $60 turbo setup is not really about turbochargers. It is about the advantage of ignorance, the power of necessity, and the democratic nature of physics. Danny did not know turbos were supposed to be expensive and complicated. He just knew compressed air plus more fuel equals more power. He did not have money for the right way, so he invented a wrong way that worked. This is how progress actually happens. Not in corporate R&D labs with unlimited budgets, but in garages with limited resources and unlimited determination. The constraints are not obstacles. They are creative catalysts. Detroit spent millions developing turbo technology in the 80s. Danny spent $60. Both proved turbos worked. Only one of them made it affordable for working-class kids. Today you cannot do what Danny did because emissions regulations and modern engine management make it illegal and impractical. But the spirit, that do-it-yourself ethos of figuring it out with what you have, is still alive. It is in the kids building electric swaps in their driveways. It is in the tuners cracking ECU codes to unlock horsepower. It is in every person who looks at the established way and asks, what if we tried this instead? Danny proved that you do not need a degree to understand engineering. You do not need money to innovate. You just need curiosity, persistence, and the willingness to fail spectacularly while learning what works. $60. A junkyard turbo, screen door springs and propane bottles and irrigation pipe. It should not have worked. Every expert said it would not, but it did. And in doing so, it proved that the best solutions often come from the people who cannot afford the conventional ones. The outsiders who do not know the rules are the ones who change the game. So next time someone tells you the right way to do something costs thousands of dollars and requires expert knowledge, remember the Texas teenager who outran big blocks with spare parts and stubbornness. Sometimes the best answer is not the expensive one. Sometimes it is the one nobody else was crazy enough to try. What's the most creative budget build you've ever seen or attempted? Let me know in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe for more stories of engineering brilliance born from necessity, executed with junkyard parts and pure audacity.